everyone. Just going to do a quick camera check. Okay, we're good. How's everybody doing tonight? It's still daylight out. I'm kind of excited about that. So we're just going to give everybody a few minutes to sign in, log in, whatever they call that. I'm going to be working with my bee fabric. It's called As Sweet as Honey from Moda. All the fat quarters I had, I got the I got the other end of the fat quarter, the side that doesn't have the bigger salvage, because see, it's got butterflies. Isn't that cute? So far out of about, I don't know, 10 fat quarters, this is the first one I've got. So I'm going to save it. Hopefully I'll get a few more and I'll put them on, I'll sew them into the back of the quilt. I'll put them somewhere and that will remind me of what the fabric is. Okay, so I'll show you some of the fat quarters. So this is a nice goldeny yellow. It's very pretty. And I only have one that's this bright. So when you have one that kind of is like the Lone Ranger, you got to just put it sporadic through whatever you're doing. And you'd want to have this appear, whether it's a wall hanging or a table runner or whatever, you'd want to have this appear at least 3 times, 3, 5, 7. You always want it to be an odd number until you get to 9. And after 9, your eyeballs don't care anymore. And here's some of the gray, kind of cute, bees on it. I just had a panic moment because I knew I cut some ahead and then I couldn't remember what I did with them. And I set them aside. You know what happens when you set things aside? They go further aside than you planned on. So let's see what time it is. Oh, hi, Christine. You made it. You made it in time. So a couple of things I'm going to show you first is how I cut a fat quarter when I'm doing a project like this. And something else. Oh, what to do if it's directional. I knew there were 2 things. So let's wait just one more minute. So I'll do this. If you don't have dies, I can tell you that guess I need to get up further here. Okay, here we go. So along this bottom is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 is along the bottom. It's 2.5 tall. And this is 1, 2. It's just it looks like it would be 2 5/8. So if you draw 2 5/8 and you leave a space 2.5, and draw like that you have a center point, and then draw your 5.5, and then you just connect those. You can make yourself a little template. Now that's the cutting. So you don't have to add the seam allowance because the seam allowance is already in that. So you could actually make these from a jelly roll, 2.5-inch strip. Just get your angle right, and I can't tell you. Let me see if I can. I don't think oh, it's 60 degrees. How's that? I just put it on here. That's a 60-degree angle. How's that? Does that help you out? You got that, Christine? 60-degree angle. Because I put it on my mat and it's running right along the 60 degrees. Okay? So if you want to make your own template, that's about the size of it. And when I show you how I cut with the die, you have to keep in mind if you're cutting with a ruler, it's going to be basically the same idea. There's nothing different about it. So I didn't do it as 2.5, and you'll see I did it as 5.5. Okay, so I think it's time for us to get started. How many have I got? Oh yeah, plenty of time. So, hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm using the Gemini, and you can use the Gemini or the Gemini Junior. And this is a hexagon, but it's a half hexagon. And the advantage of this is there's no Y seams. And when I get it more of it together, Y seams will make more sense. I mean, what a Y seam means. So this comes with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sizes. And I picked, so this is the biggest one. I picked next to the biggest one. So this is 3. Then this would be 2.5. No, I'm sorry, 3, 2, 2.75, and it's the distance from top to bottom. So 3, 2.75, and I came back here. This one, the one I used is 2.5 on the little chart. Okay. I'm struggling already. I don't know why I have such a hard time with it. All right. I know, you're saying just set it aside. Okay, I'll just set it aside. Okay, so that's what I'm using. Now, when I determine how much fabric I'm gonna cut, I'm gonna look at, let me get my, so the first thing I'm gonna look at is my fat quarter, and every time I use a fat quarter in a video, I'll tell you the exact same thing. I want the long way going away from me, and the short way would be going left to right. I don't have a better way to explain that. And I'm going to fold it in half. Now this has, I'm not sure if you can see the little fuzziness there? So this has, opposite the end that has the big salvage on it, it has a littler one on this end. So you don't have to cut as far in, cut off as far in. So I'm just going to take that little fuzzy part. So I'm folding it in half. So I took the long end, folded it down to the other long end. So I'm still 18 inches across. Okay, and I'm just going to fold it so it's above that little fuzzy line. And you can go ahead and cut that off. And then, because I tend to work in a smaller area, I'm going to fold it again. And I find that even if I have a bigger area to work in, I prefer to work with smaller rulers if I can, because then I don't get in as much trouble, if you know what I mean. So it just so happens that when I put this die on, when I folded and folded again evenly, my die makes it edge to edge inside of that fold. So that worked out perfect. In making this particular project, now I know a few weeks ago, month or so ago, I think it was, I showed you how to use the little half hex, and I did a little project, maybe a mug rug or something, I can't remember, and I just had these half hexes randomly. This time, I want to end up having a whole hexagon, so that's this part, and then flip it in this part. I want to have the whole hexagon of each color. And you'll see as I go along. Well, let me do this. Hold on. Because I've got this one started. And so, for example, just to give you a visual, here's half my hexagon, and in my next row, I'm going to match it. So see, now I've got the full hexagon. Does that make sense? So when I get this finished, the quilt is going to look like all hexagons. And I thought this was perfect for my bee fabric because I wanted to have bigger pieces, and I could have gone bigger, but I don't know, I kind of like this size. I wanted to be able to see the fabric. And if I cut it all up, all I have is color. I don't have the fabric. And I keep looking at this thinking, oh, maybe I should have made it bigger, but we gotta stop that, right? So I'm going to be making the right half and the left half, or the top and the bottom, depends how you look at it, of each color, okay? So this one would be, oh, you know what, I don't want to grab those. Those are all paired up. Here we go. So do you see how that would look, a whole hexagon? Of course, it looks a little wider because this has been stitched already. And this would be a whole hexagon. You see it? Okay, and so forth. And I'm going to show you how we're going to go in between them. Because I don't want to have, if I had background fabric here and here, and here, in between the hexes, when I did my quilt, I just have a long vertical row of hexagons, so it would look very, what do you call it, lateral. You know, it would look like stripes, and I didn't want to have that. Okay? It'll make a little more sense as we go along, hopefully. Okay, so that means when I cut, I'm going to cut, the first time I'm going to cut from here, and the next time I'm going to turn it and cut on this side, so that I will have a left and a right, or top and a bottom, depends how you look at it, but I'll have a whole hexagon. Hey, Rhonda. Hey, Mary Lou. How's everybody doing? Oh, Rhonda, it said, hi, Christine and Lorene. I looked up, I thought it said hi, something about Christmas. I was all excited. Thinking, oh, something Christmas. I know. I digress. So when I cut this strip, I want to make sure that I can get both of my cuts from the strip I make. So I don't want to make a strip that's 2.5. I mean, I could with the bees, it wouldn't matter. But when it comes to this type, I want to make sure as best I can, and you'll see what I mean later, but I want to make sure that I have a complete pattern. Now, because I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam here, I'm not going to have a complete pattern because part of it will go into the seam, but it's busy enough that at least it'll look coherent, okay? If you were working with a jelly roll, you would just cut, on your jelly roll, some this way, and keep going. And it won't make that big a difference. I'm just being a little fussy, and I'm trying to make sure I sort of match it up. I could get halfway through and say, yeah, forget that. Okay, so I want to make sure I don't want to put my die to the edge. And if I was cutting with a ruler, I would trim this off and make it straight. And then I just want to get an idea. So I was about here. And I'm going to turn it, make sure I have a little space. So I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5.5. So I need a 5.5. Oh, let me push up higher here. I need 5.5 inch strip. Now, when I say 5.5, it's really a little over because this raggedy edge, I put about a 1/4 inch past one of my straight lines on my grid. And then I counted over 5.5 because I don't want to sit fussing around with making this edge exact. Okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. So I always put my ruler on. I think I'm over too far now. Hold on. I put my ruler on where it's supposed to be. I'm lining up with my grid. I'm really out of the, there we go. Yeah, let me move that out of the way. So I've lined my fabric up with the grid to keep it straight. And I'm lining my ruler up with the grid to keep the ruler straight. And I want to make sure I'm straight, horizontal, and vertical. And before I cut, I'm going to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, see, there was one off. I was right the first time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. I always count it at least twice, sometimes 5 times. And remember, I'm a little to the right of the straight line here, just because it's a little messy. The edge, not all the edges are perfect. Okay? Oh, so before I forget, because I started to tell you, I have the lengthways going this way. So a fat quarter is 18 inches wide and 20 to 22 inches tall. So when I cut lengthways, I'm not affecting the length of the rest of this fat quarter. I still have 20, 22 inches. If I went the other way and cut across the 22 inches and took off 5.5 inches, now my longest point at anywhere is 18 inches. And you'll find that that makes a big difference a lot of times. So when you can, and I'm going to show you on the next one that I can't, when you can, always use up your width and try to keep your distance as much as you can. Keep your distance. That's all you've been hearing for years, isn't it? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that. And I'm just going to put it here because this is all folded and ready for me to put the die on. So I'm just going to fold this up because if I need more, I just can unfold and I'm already folded for the die to go. Okay? So let me move these up out of the way so you can see better. This fabric is directional because it has words on it. So, there's my die. If I put my die, let's see. If I put my die this way, the words are going across. I couldn't put my die in this direction because now the words are sideways. I mean, you could, and just have your random words around. So we want to make sure that we pay attention to directional. Excuse me. So if my words were going horizontal, they were going from the left and right of the 18 inches. Excuse me. I would have to cut off my length because it's a directional fabric. Does that make sense? Hi, Cindy. Oh yeah, Mary Lou loves hexagons. These are big hexagons, Mary Lou. So does that make sense? If you have a directional fabric, pay attention. You might have to turn, and if my words were going left to right, I would have to then bite the bullet and cut off my length, my 22 length. But that's it just happens now and again. I'm fortunate on this one that I don't. Okay? Now this one, let me see. If I'm cutting here, I have to think about this now. If I'm cutting here, I can flip over. My fabric is still going because I haven't moved my fabric. My fabric is still going in the right direction. So if I had a jelly roll, but I was going to put two things together, when I flip and do this way, it would be upside down. So you'd have to match up like every other one to every other one. And that's almost getting to be too much. So again, taking the length, because the length is going away from me. The width, the short width is going left and right. I'm going to fold it in half. And I'm keeping that little fuzzy part up by itself. Okay? I'm not concerned that this is perfect, because it's not. Well, it is when I pick it up, but there, you can see the lightness. I'm not going to worry about that, because I'm going to set that just to the right of my straight line when I count over for the 5.5. If I was cutting this as just strips, that's the part I would trim off. Okay? I have to stand up, make sure I have this right. So I'm going to put about 1/4 of an inch past my solid line. Make sure my fabric is lined up across. Sometimes it won't be perfect, but we at least try to make sure this fold is perfect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. So I'm putting my 1/2 inch. Putting my 1/2 inch line of my ruler on the inch line of the mat. So I'm halfway through one of the squares. Now I moved it again. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm good. Okay. And again, I want to make sure my ruler is straight. So my lines are straight this way, and my lines are straight horizontally. My fabric is running right along the bottom of my fold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5, because every time I stop and talk, I have to count again just to be sure, even if it's talking to myself. And I have already pressed my fabric before I did any cutting. If you don't like to press, just send it to Rhonda's house, because she'll do all your pressing for you. I'm sorry. I'm just amusing myself, because Rhonda doesn't like to iron. Well, she's better at it. She likes it better. She doesn't love it. Okay, so I did the first row ahead, so you didn't have to watch me sewing that many rows. So let me just move this over here. So I'm going to get my plates, and I have my fabric plates. So if you have a Gemini, I'm sorry, I'll keep it like this for the glare. The fabric plates, one has an A and one has a B, and it's on all 4 corners, so you can't miss it. So you have your clear plate and then your A, so you're cutting into A. And if you're like me and forget and have your die going the wrong way, it does leave a little mark. Doesn't leave a mark on this one, so they aren't exactly the same. This one is a heavier one. Okay. I'm running out of room. So what I'm going to do, see, I had that so nice and folded, didn't I? Is I'm going to put down one of my little folded pieces that I unfolded. And before I do anything else, I'm just going to put my die on to make sure it fits and make sure I have plenty of room on this side, so I'm good. So what I'm trying to accomplish is I'm cutting this so that when I put the two pieces together, I have a whole hexagon of this section of fabric. Okay? So that gives us, there's 4 there. So I'm going to go ahead and add another one. And I gotta stand up for this. And I want to make sure they're lined up the same. If they're not exactly the same, I'm okay on my left side. And again, I'm just going to double check. I don't want to go to the very edge because remember, it could be a little dodgy out there. Okay. So I'm just going to put my finger here. And I've probably got a 1/2 inch of room because it's 2.5, 2.5 is 5, and we cut it 5.5. So I don't need to be up at that edge. And I want to be careful because I just have enough fabric to make it to each end. Okay? I'm going to put this on a slant because I don't need it to go through my machine straight. It'll make less noise if I put it on a slant. So I'm going to tape this in place. Where's my plate? Okay. B is next. So it's easy. A first, B second. And then my other clear plate. And then I'm just going to put it in to my Gemini. And I could have used the junior plate because the junior plate is half of the big plate. I'm only feeding through half, but we're good. We can stand an extra, 5 seconds? Okay. So I took off clearing A. I'm going to go ahead and take my tape off. The only thing I'm holding down is I want the fabric to stay in place. I don't necessarily care about the dye. Okay, so I have 2 fabrics here. So I'm just going to separate them. So fabric 1 and fabric 2. Now, I don't need to move my fabric. I'm just going to turn it. And I'm going to go pretty close to this edge, but I'm not going to go to the very edge because I'm sewing in a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both of these pieces, so the pattern's not going to line up exact either way. So I don't need to get so close to that edge that I might go off the edge. Okay? And normally I would flip my plates, but when I do this, and with these fabric plates, because you don't need to flip as much, I'm going to go ahead and cut both sides before I flip my plates, and that way I'm not messing around with my fabric. You know, if I put the plates down twice in the same place, it'd be great. So B, and then the clear. Okay, so now this time I'll flip my plate. So I'm just going to flip it over and then turn it. Flip it over and turn it and set those aside. Okay, so here's the part where you're going to be careful. So I'm going to take my die off And I only have a little bit of raggedy edge there to throw away. And before I forget, I'm going to flip it and turn it, flip it and turn it, so I'm ready again to go. Hopefully that's not too shiny on you. So here's my left side, and here's my right side. So I want to keep these two. I want to keep these two pieces together. I don't have to have them right sides together, wrong sides together. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to put them together and put a pin in them. If I'm real concerned with matching things up, because you might have some big flower, and the next one it's little flowers, and you don't want half of a big flower. But with the bees, it doesn't matter that much. But when I cut this the first time, I didn't think to do that, and I had to sit like a puzzle and put them all together. And I would do the same thing if I was cutting with a rotary cutter. So no matter how you cut, what you do after that point is exactly the same no matter how you get there. And then I'm going to bring down the ones I had so that my words, and again, because I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides, I'm not going to line things up. My words aren't going to be like I can read them all. But the general idea of it will be the same. And after you cut a bunch, you might want to sit and do this kind of work just to take a break for a minute or two. And again, doesn't matter if I put them right sides together, wrong sides together. It doesn't matter because I'm not going to use them both at the same time. And I'll show you that in a minute. So they don't have to be neatly lined up. They can be all wonky. It's okay. Okay? So that's 2 colors. So I'm going to set them over there. Normally I'd set them here, but now my machine's a little table. So I'm going to go ahead and do this again so everybody gets the right idea. And I cut so much, my die's got a little bend in it. And I'm going to come to a different spot on my plate. And I'm just watching for that little fuzzy edge. So again, I always take the time, let me push this back. I always take the time to put my die down and then turn it for the other side, because I don't want to accidentally do this where the short side is facing in. Excuse me. If you do, it's not the end of the world because you'll line up the opposite ends. But if you had a big flower here and not here, it might look a little funny. But I'm going to say probably nobody's going to notice, because once you have like 60 hexagons, nobody's going to look at one particular one unless it has like a big pink flower and the rest of the quilt is blue, kind of thing. But we might as well try to get it right. Okay, so again, I'm going to lay it down and then I'm just going to turn it so I notice I want my long sides facing each other. I do this every time, don't I? Lose the end of my tape. Now, if you want to, you can tape out here to hold the fabric, because the die's pretty much going to stay, but you can put the tape for the fabric, but you can also put one for the die. And I use the low-tack tape. Okay, so I'm making my sandwich again. A's on the bottom, remember? Now here's B, and then the clear. And I'm going to leave my B and my clear the same because I'm not rotating my plates. So I can go ahead and keep the tape on my finger. I'm just going to set the whole bunch right up there. Turn to the other side, and I barely have, let me see if I can show it to you without it all falling off. See, I just have a little, oh, I'm a little crooked, but see how I just, oh, well, I made it more crooked. I just have a little fabric there. Just a little safety measure, because I find if we try to get too close, then we end up getting past where we need to be. And you can see I still have a bit of fabric over here, so I'm not at any edge at any time. Okay, so I made my second cut. So I'm gonna, this time I'm just gonna flip it over and flip it over. Here's my other half. I'm gonna put them just like that so they're side by side. And I know the other color's underneath, but, and I probably would stop and normally pin these now, but in the interest of you sitting there watching. And so, see, you can see the little bit I had in between, and I have a little left on this edge and a little left on this edge. If you want to turn this little end into something, look. So if you open it up, because the fold is there, you might get a triangle out of that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the last one so that I have them all cut. So picking the, oh, so see, I almost forgot. Flip it over. I think it's supposed to be this way. Flip it over. There we go. So let's go to this spot, I guess. I just like to move it around. Hold my fabric down. I keep getting out of the picture. Again, I set it down and then turn it and go, oh yeah, my long sides are facing each other. I don't want short sides facing each other. If this was the fabric and you did short side and short side, you'd be fine because you'd probably never be able to tell the difference. It's little baby hexagons. Or was I going this way? Now, see, I can't remember now. It was this way. I almost went the wrong way. Was anybody yelling at me I was going the wrong way? It ends up being square, so it probably really doesn't matter. Because none of this fabric, none of this is directional except the words. So B and clear. It's so nice having these new fabric plates. Hey, Lynn. Oh, Rhonda, I didn't see where you liked the fabric. I really liked it. That's why I didn't want to cut it up. So I'm just holding my hands to hold the fabric in place, only because I don't want it to on a line. And I'm not sure if I told you, but you're cutting down so the ridges of your die are facing down. You're always cutting into the A fabric plate. And so let's see, how many did I get cut out? So it's 2, 4, 6, 8 of each color. And I did 2, 4, 6 colors. And more importantly, they're cut right. That's the more important part. It's nice that it's fast, but it's even nicer that they're cut right. Okay, and I'm just going to set these just like that. So let me get rid of all of this. I'm going to put my die right there so I remember where it is. Get the plates out of the way. So I'm only going to use one of each of these. So I'm just going to take those two. And I'm going to put that guy. I got to be careful. Oh, I'm out of you. So I'm just setting one on top of the other and just clipping it so they stay together. And I want one of that one. And again, I'm just laying these. So when I go back to it, I can just pull one off the top of the other, and there's a left and a right. And it doesn't matter if you turn them around, it's still a left and a right. So I am going to take the time at least do that part. And I will stick a pin in these just to be on the safe side. But they are all different fabrics. So each pair, I'm only having one pair of each fabric. So does anybody have any questions while you're watching me sort fabric? No, nothing. Oh. So in this case, do you see how I really would want to have, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I really would want to have those together. Even though this circle end up being shorter, I don't want to have two different circles, though it looks fine. Actually, it looks pretty good. But you kind of follow what I'm saying. So you know me, I try to do things the quickest way possible, but there's just times when you don't really want to do that. And I stuck a pin in that last one, didn't I? No questions at all? No comments? Nothing? Got nothing? I got everybody here? Oh, yeah, these are the ones I already did. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. 5. These are the ones I just did. 6. I got 6, right? Okay, we're good now. Okay, so the pairs for this row, right here. I want to get everybody, I'm starting to get myself mixed up here now. Okay. Let me move some things out of my own way here. Okay. So the pairs that go to this row are right here. So this is going to be the top of my quilt. Now, obviously, it's going to be longer, and you really have to commit to making your row longer. Okay, let me see. Rhonda says, if you don't have a mechanical cutter, their rule is to cut these pieces with a rotary cutter. So you can use a regular rotary cutter ruler. And I determined that this was 60 degrees. So it was, what did I tell you it was? Hold on. So once this is cut, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about 5 1/4 when it's cut, because I measured my die on the other one. 5 1/4 at the bottom, and it is. Let me get one that's straight. And it's 2 1/2 at the top, and it's 2 1/2 tall. So if you drew a rectangle, 5 by 2 1/2, and just made it, then mark in from the center of the rectangle. What did I tell you this? 1 1/4 each side of the center, and then you would just connect these lines. But this line is 60 degrees. So on your ruler, on this ruler way down here, I have a 60-degree line. So if I put that line this way, which way? Hold on. Right. If I put, and I have to do a whole lesson on that. If I take that 60-degree line and I put it to the straight side, pretend this is a strip, and I put it to the straight side of my strip. Now this angle is 60 degrees. But I'm not going to cut this side because it would cut. Do you see how part of the rectangle is under the ruler and part is not? So you pretend this is your strip and this is the end. I want to make sure the whole strip, the rectangle, is under the ruler. See how this is hanging off the ruler, but under here it's the whole way. So if this was yeah, let me do this. We digress, but that's okay. Okay, so we'll just pretend that's our strip. And this ended with a straight edge. I'm going to come down to the straight edge as close as I can. I've got my 60 degrees running along the top or the bottom, it doesn't matter. And again, all of this is out, so I'm going to go ahead and cut right here. Okay? Then I would turn my ruler, so my 60 degrees is now at the bottom on this side, but I've got to move over the proper distance. So it might be easier if you drew yourself a template, put your template on your ruler. And Rhonda, if you remind me, I'll do a YouTube on cutting something out like that, because it's much easier if you see the real thing as opposed to me putting this stuff together. But I would ask you to remind me about it. Okay. So this is the top of my quilt, or my table runner, or whatever it is. And if it's a table runner, you got to decide which way your hexagons are going to go. They're going to go widthways or lengthways, and actually it won't matter, because when this goes together, this is a hexagon from any direction. So I took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different fabrics, and I laid them down. So the first one is facing this way. The second one is opposite, so that they're always lining up equally across here. Okay, so you can see that that's not going to work because there's a hole there. Okay, so I laid them across, one way, one the other, one way, one the other. So my top is nice and straight. And I made sure I kept my pairs for what I did are right here. So I'm going to put my pairs down, but I'm only going to put the pairs down where they meet on the long side. This will make more sense as I go along. So in other words, I'm not putting this one down because it's upside down. And this pair is the other half of this one at the top, so I can probably use it at the other end when I end. Oh, okay. So now, this is my next row. I'll leave it closer. I've got to address the issue of these holes here. So what's going in these smaller areas is part of the next row. So I'm going to take, what do I have left? 2, 3. So I have 3 left that I'm going to take and I'm going to pin together, and I would put a little paper and write on it and put top leftovers and just set them aside, because by the time you use them, you'll have no clue what they're for. I'm going to grab out some other pairs, and now I'm going to place these here because this will be part of the next row. Is that starting to make sense? And so now I need one here. So I'm going to stick this one here. And I'm going to put its half right there. Because so now you see in the hexagons? And I'm going to take the black one and I'm going to put it here. And I'm just going to lay out a few rows just so you can actually start to see the hexagons. Oh, I think I want this gray one. Okay, so now on each edge, it is going to be crooked, but when you're done, you're just going to you're going to hack that little extra off to make it straight. So there's no point at which this is going to come out straight on these ends, but the top is straight and the bottom will be straight. And I'm going to put this one right here. I probably need, because what did I do? I put that. So I want to put one more here. Am I going the right way? Did I just mess myself up? No, because it'll be 6 and 5, 6 and 5, 6 and 5, I think. So I could put, now, so I'm doing 4 rows. I've got this one left. And let me get another color. So I'm going to grab out another pair. Because, you know, you can only lay up, so I don't want a gray next to a gray. So I'll do that. So I'm going to have these two are left because they go here. But can you see now all the hexagons? Oh, Rhonda, you have the template material, so you could make a template on your scanning cut and cut it out on there. There may be a hexagon in there. So these two pieces that I have left, I'm going to put a pin in them, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put a note on it that this is the 5th row. Okay? Put a note on it right away, telling you. But now, can you see the hexagons? Is it starting to make sense? So now when I get ready to sew, I'm just going to move this over. I'm just going to put a little space in between them so I can pick them up. Okay? So now, let me put them back together for a second to show you why we're doing this in halves. Okay. So it looks like there's nothing there. It's really fabric there. If this was a whole hexagon, you would have to do a Y seam, which means you'd have to start a 1/4 inch in, and you'd have to stop a 1/4 inch before the edge, and then you have to kind of fold it one way, then fold it another to make this if it was a whole hexagon. So you would stitch here, but then you've got to stitch here, but you can't stitch here. You can't stitch this part because now this is another hexagon, so you'd only come down this far, and you can't go there because there's nothing there yet. You get the confusion of it all? And it isn't going to end up looking much different than this once it's all quilted and once it's all done. You won't notice those lines because your eye is drawn to this shape. So does that make sense? Hi, Persis. Does that make sense to why we're doing it in halves? Because you don't want it's like you'd have to put in one hexagon, so you'd have this hexagon as a whole hexagon, and then you'd have to sew from here to here and stop a 1/4 inch before, and a 1/4 inch. You're going to start a 1/4 inch in and end a 1/4 inch before. Then you'd have to sew this part to this part, and then you'd have to sew this part to this part. There's your Y. Do you see the Y? And that's okay if you're hand stitching. So if you're doing little tiny hexagons, you hand stitch them, it's so much faster. So that a Y seam is, here's the Y. Here's part of the Y, and then there's the tail of the Y there. So it's kind of like this. So you have to sew here, you have to sew here, and then you have to sew down here. Make sense before I pull it all apart? Yes, Cindy, that's the thing with Y seams. They do look puckery. They're easier to do by hand than they are on a machine, because you have to stop exactly, and then you have to pivot, then you have to realign your fabric. Sometime I'll actually sew a Y seam if you really want to see one, but not today. So I'm just going to move these apart. And if I'm working on my quilt, I'm probably only going to lay out a couple rows at a time, unless I'm going to work at it all day, which that never works, because I don't want to get this all mixed up. So if I only did 2 rows, then other half to whichever piece is on the wide side, I would pin and put, you know, row 3 or row 10 or whatever it is. Okay? And then I would lay down the row that's sewn already so that I can go ahead and lay out the pieces properly. So is everybody okay with that? Do I need to lay it out again, or does everybody kind of get that? Okay, I'm gonna pretend you all said yes. So now for sewing, and I did this. It was about a month ago, on a Thursday night where I did little ones, and I showed you how to sew, because you can't. So I'm gonna sew. This is, and I'm facing in your direction. So this is column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, or so forth. So when I flip this over, I can't line up edge to edge. Let me see if I've got a little pin. I have a little tiny applique pin, because if I line it up edge to edge, and then I take a 1/4 inch seam, and don't sneeze while you're out, and I take a 1/4 inch seam, so the point of one is lined up with that edge, so I'm actually edge to edge, but I'm going to take a 1/4 inch seam, and what happens is it'll, hold on, let me get my little display. What will happen is that one's up here, do you see it? And one's down, got a space there. So you can't line them up edge to edge, because a 1/4 inch in is a little different. And this isn't hard. Once you do 2 or 3 of them, every time I start one of these, I probably have to rip out the first 2 or 3, because it just takes you a while to get your eyeball situated. Or eyeballs. You can use one eye or 2. What we want to do, and I'm going to hold it up. I got to get rid of that little tiny pin because I can barely hold on to it. Is we're doing a scant 1/4 inch. Yeah, don't try to pin on your pressing mat, because it goes into the mat. So what we want to have, okay, you see the little piece sticking off there? That should be about a 1/4 inch. And if I look down here and I turn it over, see it? That's a 1/4 inch. So the first time you do it, you might not eyeball the 1/4 inch. And I'm going to tell you, Lynn, that you don't want to measure every one of them with a ruler, because it depends on your actual seam allowance, and every day it can be different, exactly how that has to be. But if I do the first one, and if it doesn't come out right, I'll show you how it's going to adjust. So can you see see how it's peeking off the edge? And you can see this one, see how it's going over the edge? It's equal distance on each end. It's equal eyeball distance. I really want you to use your eyeball. Because if you have to measure every one, you're just going to go berserk. Yeah, Cindy says it should be Y, W-H-Y seams. Yeah, like, why would you ever do that? Yeah, exactly. It's exactly true. It's exactly true. So it doesn't matter which one is on the top, which one's on the bottom when you sew. It doesn't matter. And you know, we put our pin in so we know where we're sewing, so we don't like sew over here by accident. So let's switch over to sewing. And let's see, I gotta take my glasses off to sew. Okay. I have on my 1/4 inch foot with the guide. I'm using my 1/4 inch foot with the guide today. Now this 1/4 inch foot is a newer one. And it has, oh, now I can put my glasses back on. Oh, Jesus. I should have one eyeball doing one thing and one doing the other. It has a, let me use my little pointer here. It has a little bit bigger hole than the usual round one. You see how it's just a little bit oblongy here? So that means I can move my needle right or left a little bit without hitting the middle of the foot. So on your machine, we want to have, I find that a scant, I was trying to do this without getting my hands in your way, and there we go. Sorry. What was I saying? I find that doing these hexagons and some of this stuff, that the scant 1/4 inch just seems to work better for me. So scant just means that your needle is going one notch, to the right. Is that right? Or is it to the left? To the right. I had a moment there. Because this is your seam allowance. So if I'm moving my needle right, I'm having just a tad skinnier seam allowance. Okay? So on your machine, on your sewing machine, if you have a left-right shift, so it looks like an L, front/R shift, you just move that one click to the right. If you don't have that and you're on a straight stitch, you can move your width one stitch to the right. Because there's no width on the straight stitch. You're just moving the needle over. So most electronic machines, no matter how basic, will let you move your needle to the right or left on that straight stitch using the width control. Does that make sense? Well, what'd you say, Lynn? No pins and no ruler. I know it's terrible, isn't it? We're gonna have to get you a helmet and some knee pads for safety. Okay. So when we start stitching, where am I? Here I am. We're stitching right in where this little gully is, where the two fabrics meet. Generally, that's the mark for the 1/4 inch. You may be in a little bit, but your goal is to be somewhere. You can see it better here. See the little valley we got going here? Let me get my finger out of there. There we go. We're stitching right in here, and we're aiming to the other end that has the upside down valley. It's really not a mountain. It's upside because there's nothing there. Okay? You can have one pin for this, Lynn. Okay. So I have to just get around the camera here for a second. So remember, we want to have fabric under our needle, just barely, but fabric under the needle. You'll have less headaches later. The edge of my fabric is in line with the edge of my 1/4 inch foot, the guide. I'm going to take that pin out, and you notice, as always, I keep my hand on my fabric when I take the pin out. So the only job I have is to keep the fabric next to the fabric guide. I don't need to be looking at what the needle's doing. It's got its own job, doesn't need my help. Okay, so let's see what we get. Okay, so I'm going to switch back over to the work table. Okay, so when I open this up, it's the first time I've wished I didn't do it right. and push the seam to one side. Hold on. Sorry about that. My roller was hiding in the corner. Oh. So it lined up. Okay, now, if the top was higher, the bottom would automatically be lower. You only have so much fabric. If the top was higher, let me see if I can, let me do one. Oh, geez. I just lost a piece. Hold on. Let me do one that, yeah, remember the old, don't put the mat down on top of the fabric? Okay, let me put this back. Okay, so I'm gonna put this one on because it's easy. Trust me, it was just by accident it came out right. It isn't because I have some wild talent to get it right all the time. Seems like if I stand up to sew, that seems to work better. Okay, so let me flip this one over. And I'm gonna make what I'm doing is I'm making a bigger little dog ear here. Okay? Because I want you to see how you can fix it without going off the edge and having to fix it like 400 times. Until you just have some shreds of fibers left and no hexagon. And I didn't show, well, you can see I'm sewing, so I didn't switch the camera over. Okay. So I'm going to live on the edge here and push these down. Okay. Oh, for crying out loud. Okay. So I'm a little off at the top. And I'll tell you, if I was that little off, I wouldn't. If I'm that little off. All right. So here's another thing you want to look at. If I press this seam towards me, this fabric is a little higher. If I press the seam away from me, it looks better. So let's just say that it's a little bit higher. So that means if I turn this over, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. So if I look at this, and this fabric was higher, so that means that this top triangle is too big. I tend to concentrate on either the top triangle all the time or the bottom one. I don't need to keep them both because if I get one right, the other one's always right. So if I just keep my eye on one triangle instead of both, I'm better off. That's how it works for me. So I'm gonna undo this. And normally I wouldn't if it was that close. But I'm going to undo this, and I know I need to make this triangle a little smaller, which means I'm pulling this fabric down a tad. And when I say a tad, I mean like the width of your pin. Like this much. Can't see my pin anywhere. There it is. So I'm moving it down like literally the width of my pin. There's your tad. If you want to know what a tad is, that's what it is on this project. Now, when you rip your seam out, be careful because I didn't check to see which way the straight of grain is, but it just happened to come out right. But I always know that if I have something on the angle, no matter how I placed it, if I cut something on the angle, there's my stretch. So I don't want to just yank this off and hope for the best, because I don't want to yank this fabric. It'll stretch it. Okay? Am I yelling at you? I feel like I got loud there. So I'm just going to carefully take my seam out. Now, this all depends on you, whatever your seam allowance is, of having the same seam allowance every time. So if I move this yellow fabric down and then I take a different seam allowance, I'm going to have a problem again. So stick to one seam allowance, whatever it is. So I'm moving the yellow down, or I'm just moving the other fabric up, but I just want to see a little less of that triangle, just a little less. And we're lined up along this edge, I hope. Watch my head. Okay. And I'll put a pin in it. I'll put a pin in it in honor of Lynn. Okay. And I'm going to pick this up slowly to make sure I didn't pull everything off. Wasn't it a couple weeks ago I picked it up and there was nothing here? That was a clever mind part. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to stitch again. And I don't want to do this too many times on the same fabric. Because, no, watch, I'm sorry, I moved my hand there. Because you will stretch it. My job, my only job, is to keep my fabric lined up and also with each other and lined up with the guide. My job isn't looking at the needle or looking over there, because the minute you look away, you're going to do one of these kind of things. So your job is to just keep this straight as it comes in next to your guide. Okay? And it looks bright to you, but I'm on like number 2 of my light, so I can barely see the guide. Maybe that's the secret of my success today. I can barely see the guide and it's working out good. And I think I may have, looking at that yellow, I may have gone too far, but at least if I did, it'll show you how it looks when it's too far. Okay, so now we're nice and lined up. Okay? So once you do that a couple times, your eyeball will know how to look at the little triangle. So let me just do a couple more. And I'll just sew, because you can see that distance. And when you get over to the machine and you look at your little triangle and it looks a little bigger than you thought, just adjust it before you start. And what made me think to say that is because mine looks a little bigger than it's supposed to, but hey. So I don't have to worry about the triangle at this end, because it automatically would be right if the top one is right. And I'm going to do one more so that I can show you how this goes together. So this time I'm looking right here at this little triangle. I'm not worried. I want to see one of them. It doesn't matter if it's top or bottom. It's generally the one that's peeking out, because this one is facing down. I can't see. This one is peeking out where this fabric is peeking through this black fabric. And again, this relies on you making sure you do your seam allowance the same every time. And if you have the guide, you should be able to do that. And you'll start to notice that when you sew down and you come out the wait a minute. When you hold on, get that out of your way. When you're sewing down towards this end, your needle is going to come out right where that little upside down valley is, right where the two fabrics meet. You see it? Can you see it okay? Okay. And what you want to do is, if I pressed a seam allowance, if I press this row to the right, seam allowances, I'm going to press this row to the left. Okay, because my seam allowances are going to meet up. And while I'm doing that, does anyone has any questions? I'm going to take these two go together. I'm just going to pin these back together because I'm not going to sew them, and I don't want to go through that. I don't want to go through that again. And this goes with this one. And I know these three, something's wrong here. But I know these two are going to go with this, so I'll pin these two together and set them over there. This one doesn't much matter who you hook it up with. Okay, I just don't want to have too big a mess because this is actually gonna be something. So if I don't remember, I'm going to turn this over. So these seams are coming towards me. So these seams are going to go away from me. And remember, we're just pressing. We're not, we're just, what is it called? We're just pressing. We're not ironing. I was going to say pressing, ironing, pressing. Okay? And you're not going to put this together wrong because this is what would happen. I'm pretty sure you can figure out that's not quite right. Unless that's the look you're going for. So you're not going to sew this together wrong. Now, you might look here and think, oh my God, I did it wrong. But when two short ends meet, they don't match. It's only the wide ends that match. Does that make sense? Wide ends match, short ends don't. And I mean match fabric. Okay? So I'm going to flip this over. And I have to go this way because I'm right-handed. And I want to make sure that my seams are nested. Now, I'm saying that, and then I'm thinking to myself, are they nested or are they offset? Well, let's find out. When you're not sure, stitch it and find out. Otherwise, you'll sit there frozen in fear and nothing happens. It's just fabric. You can unsew. We're all adept at unsewing. So if I'm not sure, I'm only going to stitch a few of them. I won't stitch down 40 inches of strip wondering if it's right or not. So I'll just put a few of these together. And it's the same old, you can feel that seam all the way down. Nestled beside, one seam is nestled beside the other. It sounds cozy, doesn't it? Nestled beside each other. I'm going further than I normally would if I was testing, but that way if it's wrong, you'll have like some kind of a dramatic moment. So the seam is on the angle, it's following the seam under it that's on an angle, okay? So I'm going to start at this end, and I'm going to sew down, and then flip it, and we'll see what happens. So you're going to be careful at this edge because that little point will want to just suck down inside of your machine. So I'm just going to come in a little ways because I know this end is going to get trimmed off to meet this side here at some point. So I don't need to be at the very, very, very edge. Don't you wish that was the case for everything? Now I want to make sure that I'm feeling my seam to make sure it's lying. Is it lying or laying flat? I'm going to come up to my next seam and make sure it's still nice and flat. My fabric underneath is trying to run away that way, so I'm just reaching under here with my left hand and pulling that underneath fabric back where he belongs. Now this time I feel like, which way is my seam? Which way are my seams going? This way. So my seam underneath turned, and I could feel it because when it turns and goes in the same direction as the top one, you can feel that big bunch. Now I know this one's backwards because the rest of them were facing me. I don't know what happened. I'm pushing that one that's underneath down. And it could happen that I ended up with them going the opposite direction. And you just, seams like this, seams, S-E-A-M-S, like this, you can just flip them to go the way they need to go. But I can feel that I've got a space between my seams. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to go a little further. And honestly, if I was doing something that was like 40 hexagons long, if I make shorter strips and I leave this much of it undone, I can make another strip and then add it on, and then add on to this one and keep going. So if I leave this much unsewn, I can add on more to my row. Does that make sense? Because I have commitment issues, so doing like 40 hexagons at once might might be too much for me. Okay, so I'm going to give this well, I'm going to look first, because if I press it, I'm pressing in that seam and I might not want to. So look at that. We're looking pretty good. Now I'll press it. Don't press until you make your commitment. But you can see how it's a little wavy? See how it's not? And then, forget which one was the top row. This one, I think. So I've got my top row on top. I'm sorry, I have to turn this or I'll burn myself. My top row is on the top, so that when I flip it up, my seam allowance is going to go up. Does it matter? No. It can go up or down, doesn't matter, because once you go across, there's no other seam that's going to cross it. But it does look nice when they all go the same direction. And you can only see that, as long as your quilt's not quilted. Because once it's quilted, you can't see it. You can't see the beauty of your seams anymore. And I'm trying to stay in the center on the seam and not the edges. So if you see me going towards the edge, I've lifted my iron up just a tad. Okay, so there we go. So we can see we've got a couple hexagons. We got one whole one, one whole one, one whole one. Now, if you put this away for 2 months, it isn't going to matter, because the first thing you're going to lay down is the brother to this one and whatever. So it's on the long side. You're going to go ahead and lay down the ones that match the other part of the long side. And remember, because this was row 2, you're going to take the pieces that are left, which are the other long ones. You're going to pin them together and just write down row 3. Here's row 1, here's row 2, and here's my little pile of 3. When you get to this, so that's these. So I'm going to put this one down and this one down, and then it would be whatever was here down. Okay? This empty spot, remember, is something new. You got to put something new. You don't want this same color. You want something new. So on the short side of every row is something new. New color, new fabric. Does that make sense? So if you lay down the other half of the long piece, it's easy to know where you're picking up. If you, like I said, if you didn't touch this for a year, 5, 3, 10, whatever, as long as you pin these 2 or however many were in the row, and they don't even really have to be stacked in order, because if you can't figure out that that's not right, you know what I'm saying? It's easy for you to figure out, okay, yeah, that one goes with that one, that one goes with that one. Now, I'm looking at this, and what did I pay no attention to? Hold on. Hold on. Because you will do this. So what's wrong with this picture? My words are upside down. So I should have put that one in that spot. Okay? And it'll happen. And I think if I remember correctly, it was way back when we were doing the Gemini Christmas table runner. And you remember I had one wrong and I had to take everything around it apart. So if you got 10 rows done and you saw these were upside down, you can take that out and put it right side up. I'm sure you can, because you would just open this up, and when you open up here, you're going to open up from here to here, because you have to have enough room to flip some fabric out of the way while you're sewing other fabric. And yes, you would have yourself a little Y seam. Okay, so does that make sense? Do you see how easy? If you label this number 3, no matter if there are 20 of them. Okay, now, if you had more than one in the same row, I'd make sure I stacked them, because you want to make sure the pieces go together. Though you're going to see that, see, once that's together, it's not the full circle anymore. So it probably doesn't even matter if you match any of them. Because once you do that half inch, quarter inch, and quarter inch, your design is not fully there. Cindy says she doesn't mind the words being different. No, but if you do that, well, okay, 2 things. If you do that, then you want to have some up, some down. Or if you're like me, I don't mind having one that's upside down and see if people notice the one that's upside down out of the whole quilt. It'll be like, Where's Waldo? So I agree with you, Cindy. And especially if you did a table runner, because the person sitting over here would have all his words upside down. The person sitting over here would have his words all right side up. So if you kind of mix it up, then you're good. Okay? Does anybody have any questions on that? Oh, thanks, Cindy. Yeah, it does look pretty neat, doesn't it? I'm undecided now, and I can't change my mind because I've cut too much stuff of what size I should have done. But I haven't decided how big I'm going to make this. I may just make it like a wall hanging because I want to look at it. And if it's a quilt folded up, I'm not looking at it. So let me just check and see if anybody has any questions. And I wasn't meaning to be silent. I just was checking my computer behind me fell asleep, and that's the one I read. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts or anything on this? So for those of you that know, in April, I call it my April Insanity List, and it's my list of projects for the year, and I'll post a new one each day and a little bit about it. So I will post about this and probably refer to this video, but I am going to try as I go along with the projects, like this one, and do a small video as I go further and further if I have issues or if I have things that you might like to know about. So that's my goal. And again, I will probably show you, well, no, I will show you, because I don't know yet how long I want to have this, because I just thought about it the other day. So I will show you how you can add on your rows to add on more. And again, like 40 of these across, that's a lot of laying down, and we don't all have room to lay down 40 things at one time. Where we could, if we sewed part of the row together, or part of the 2 rows together, we could at least put this up hanging off of somewhere as we continue to lay the pieces down. Does that make sense? So I can put this up like this, so I can still see the whole row, but now I got room to lay down more pieces. And I don't have to worry about row 3 until I get to it, because I already know that the long side has a mate that I've already put a pin in and put in my pile as row 3. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to matter about matching these up at all. And if I find that that's the case, because what I'll do is I'll do some that don't match and then see if it shows. That's the only way you're going to know. Just try it and see. And if it doesn't make any difference, then we can just put these in a pile of each color and then grab out the color as you need it. That would make it much easier. Oh, thanks, Cindy. Okay, so any questions at all? So thanks everyone for joining in. Remember that there's no Saturday sew along this week because I work all day. I was gonna try to throw up a video, but I've worked all this week just about, so I didn't have time. But next week is Holy Saturday, Easter Sunday, so I will try to put a video up, and it'll post like at 1 o'clock, at the regular time. And I think I'm just going to do a little video on how to piece batting, a couple little things like that. And that way you'll have something there. So thanks everyone again. Thanks for joining in. And it's Thursday night, so have a great weekend. Even if it's raining a little, as long as it's not, 10 degrees out, I'm good with that. So thanks again, everyone, for joining in, and I'll see you next Thursday, Thursday night. And I don't know what it'll be. It'll be something. It won't be this. We've had enough of this. That we can just get our pieces ready. But Rhonda, if you would remind me about making this hexagon with your regular rulers, mat, and rotary cutter. I'll do that, and we can cut together. So again, thanks again, everyone. Have a great night. Make sure you hit like on the video and you've subscribed and ring the bell and all those good things. And I appreciate you all joining in. Bye-bye.